The Scottish Parliament needs more powers. The next 3 years will see local government finances decimated. That's the money our communities need for education, for social care, for cleansing, for roads, for libraries, and for community centres. The financial settlement from Westminster contains just about enough to contain inflation this coming year, but maybe not even enough for that. But for the next 2 years, there will have to be savage cuts across all areas of Scottish government spending. Nor can the Scottish government borrow its way out of the crisis. Its borrowing powers are minimal, even less than that of a local authority, and has already reached the global limit set back in 1998. This means that even investment for future growth is blocked. Just think about what this means. There's a growing demand that local authorities take back the buses from the transport monopolies. Even if the Scottish government wanted to challenge the likes of Stagecoach, it cannot do so because it does not have the money to buy them out. The same is the case for care homes, run by a piratical consortium of hedge funds with terrible consequences during COVID. The Scottish government is committed to setting up a national scheme for care standards, but it won't have control of it. And equally, it won't have the money to tackle the funding crisis in our health services and schools. That's why the Scottish government needs more financial powers, particularly more borrowing powers. But it also needs something more. It needs control over economic and industrial policy, powers that have just been stolen by Boris Johnson. They were there in the original Act of 1998, which set up the Scottish Parliament. They were then largely overridden by EU competition rules in state aid and competitive tendering. But now they've returned, and Johnson has retained them and centralized them in Westminster. It will be Westminster that decides on them, and under Johnson it has already decided in the interests of big business. This means that any support for new industrial development or financial aid to stop closures cannot be decided in Scotland, nor can councils use public money, which comes from taxes paid by you and me, to say that services should be supplied through the public sector instead of private contractors. The power is now being reserved for Westminster, and no wonder. We saw what Downing Street did with private contractors during COVID. That's why the Scottish Parliament needs these powers: greater financial borrowing powers and economic policy over state aid and tendering for public contracts. And we need to be demanding them now. The crisis is already upon us. That's why in Wales they've already set up a campaign to do so. There's a Labour Party Plaid Cymru alliance in power in the Welsh Senate, which has set up a constitutional commission. Wales, it says, needs these new powers, but so does Scotland. Trade unions and communities need to be calling now for a similar campaign here. Our future, our dignity, and even our lives depend on it.